Welcome to the channel Sleepy Historian. Tonight, we embark on a slow, detailed journey into everyday life in the Soviet Union. Without politics, without major events, just the silence of apartments, the rhythm of ordinary days, and the hum of an old radio in the corner. This story is about the little things that made up an entire era. Morning buckwheat, wool blankets, long lines at the grocery store, the scent of laundry detergent, and those familiar carpets hanging on the walls. Settle in, dim the lights, allow yourself to relax, and just listen. And while you're getting ready for sleep, leave a comment. Where are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? We're always curious to know how far our quiet story reaches. The alarm clock rings sharply, just as it always does. Its round metal body stands on the cabinet next to a teacup, the same one used just yesterday. The dial has yellowed with time. The hands tremble slightly. It's 5:30 in the morning. The room is dim. Thin curtains let in a pale glow from the street lamp outside. The walls are covered in warm, slightly faded wallpaper with a geometric pattern. Above the bed, a carpet. That same red and brown pattern every building entrance seemed to know. The bed creaks as someone turns over. The blanket is heavy, cotton-filled, with a fabric cover printed in blue flowers. The mattress sags slightly, but it no longer matters. The body has grown used to it. In the kitchen, it's still cold. The gas stove flickers with a small blue flame. Fingers touch the aluminum handle of the kettle, always cold in the morning. The gas is lit with a match. Its smell fills the air. But it's a familiar smell, a homely one. The Okian radio is on. Faint music signals play in the background. The announcer reads the news in a calm, steady voice. The language is literary, emotionless, about the weather, about plans, about reports. On the table, a white tablecloth, old, stained, but neatly ironed. Next to it, a jar of jam and a plate with bread. Familiar yesterday's bread, slightly dried out in the gas oven. Somewhere in the next room, an elderly grandmother shuffles, putting on her robe, buttoning it up, preparing for her usual morning tea. And above all this, a sense of stillness. A Soviet morning doesn't rush. Everything is already in its place. Everything is familiar. No one is in a hurry, and time flows slowly. And in that slowness lies the deepest peace. In Soviet apartments, especially the older ones, mornings didn't begin in the bathroom, and not in front of the mirror above the sink. Most often, in the kitchen, because it was there, in the corner where the washstand stood. Enamel-coated, with a wide white basin and a tank above it, filled the night before. The water, cold, fresh, like from a mountain spring. And when it touches your face, you wake instantly. Next to it stood a glass jar filled with aluminum spoons and an old soap dish with a block of gray laundry soap. The only kind there was. This soap smelled sharp, almost industrial. But there was something steady in that scent, something familiar that said, "Today will be an ordinary day." Teeth were cleaned with powder. A small tin labeled tooth powder stood on the shelf. It opened with a click, revealing a fine white dust, like flour. It was poured directly onto a brush, or a finger. And if you touched it with your tongue, the powder would crunch on your teeth and sting your gums. The toothbrushes were simple. No colorful rubber grips, no designs, just plain plastic, blue, red, white. They were kept in a glass, all the family's brushes together. Easy to mix up, but no one ever argued. In communal apartments, things were more complicated. The bathroom was shared. Sometimes there was a line in the morning. Someone banged on the door. Someone carried a basin of water. Someone washed in their own room, hiding behind a blanket. But no one was surprised. It had always been that way. And it was bearable. To wash their hair, people used shampoo in little packets. a liquid the color of honey. The packet was torn open with teeth or scissors. Sometimes it came in jars, thick, gooey, almost like jelly. It had a strong smell, sometimes like menthol, sometimes like something factory-made and unidentifiable. But hair would shine after it. And if you added an egg, the effect was even better. Or so mothers said. Children hated washing their hair. Cold water, foam in the eyes, a towel wrapped on the head like a turban. Then, sitting by the radiator until it dried. Towels were rough, woven, often decorated with Happy New Year greetings or flower prints. They weren't soft, but they absorbed water well, and they always hung on the same nail. Troinoy cologne, one bottle for the whole family. It was used after shaving, sometimes for disinfecting, in small rural clinics, even as an antiseptic. The scent, unforgettable. Sharp, the kind that jolted you fully awake. And one more essential item, the rag. Clean, damp, used to wipe faces, hands, surfaces. Not microfiber, but cut from an old shirt, bedsheet, or robe. The rag was everywhere. All these were small things, but they were how the day began. And in these details lived the essence of true Soviet hygiene. Not perfect, but sincere, clean, and in its own way, comforting, even ritualistic. In the kitchen, the kettle begins to whistle softly. Blue, enamel-coated, with faded flowers on the side. It sits on the far burner, and the flame licks its bottom like a tongue. The lid taps from the steam, and condensation clings to its sides. As the water boils, the smell of metal mixes with the morning quiet. The table is square, wooden, with a plastic tablecloth, and always a newspaper underneath to protect the surface. The chair creaks when you sit down, and above the stove, a faded towel and a calendar with a panorama of Leningrad. Breakfast is whatever's available. No one picks and chooses. Today, buckwheat. Not with milk, just with butter. In an enamel bowl, slightly chipped at the edge. The buckwheat is grayish, a bit dry but warm. And with it, a slice of black bread. Yesterday's. Slightly stale. But if you spread a bit of butter, it's a whole different story. Butter is scarce. It's sliced thin, and the thinner the slice, the more joy it brings. It smells of cream and faintly of the fridge. It's placed on warm bread, and it melts. Slowly, quietly, almost ceremoniously. Next to the plate, a jar of jam, raspberry or cherry, homemade. Once, in the summer, Mom or Grandma had cooked it on the stove, carefully stirring with a wooden spoon. Now, it's a treat. The jam is added to tea instead of sugar, or spread on bread. Everyone has their own way. The tea is in a faceted glass, held in a heavy metal glass holder with a decorative pattern that warms the hands. It doesn't burn, but it radiates warmth. Black, strong, with lemon or just sugar. Sometimes with jam, which settles at the bottom, forming a sweet layer of syrup. Somewhere atop the kitchen cabinet stands a salt shaker shaped like an egg, white, with blue flowers. Nearby is a thick glass sugar bowl. The spoon inside is metal, with a curved handle. When scooping sugar, you can hear the familiar chime of metal against glass. In the corner, a radio. VEF or Okean. The announcer speaks quietly. News, weather, praise for labor, sometimes music, calm, wordless. Time is short. Someone in the family is already pulling on a coat. Someone is tying their boots. Someone swallows the last sip of tea and wipes their mouth with a handkerchief. Breakfast ends quickly, but the aftertaste lingers. Not from the food, but from the silence, from the presence of family, from the warmth of the kettle and the familiar creak of the stool. Everything is simple, but in that simplicity lies comfort. And it is this breakfast that completes a Soviet morning, unadorned, but full of care. While the kettle still holds some warmth and the adults finish their last spoonfuls of buckwheat, another ritual begins in the next room, the morning routine for school. The children wake reluctantly. The blanket is still warm and the room is chilly. The windows are old, wooden, stuffed with bits of cotton to block the draft. By the bed, a pair of slippers, handmade or bought at the market with crumpled foam inside. Getting out of bed isn't easy, especially in winter. The floor is cold, but time is relentless. By 7, everyone must be up. The children rise in silence. They rub their eyes with their fists, still not fully aware that morning has come. The older sister picks up a comb and starts brushing her younger brother's hair. The hair crackles with static and tickles his forehead. The sister hisses, "Stop squirming!" Their clothes hang on the back of a chair from the night before. The school uniform, one set per season. For the boy, dark trousers and a blue blazer with elbow patches. For the girl, a dark blue dress and an apron, black for weekdays, white for special occasions. All neatly ironed, no choice involved. The socks, woolen. Grandma knitted them last winter, a bit scratchy but strong. They're always warm, even in frost. The school bag, heavy, wooden or cardboard with metal clasps, often scuffed at the corners, sometimes covered in magazine stickers. Inside, notebooks with fine lines, textbooks with Lenin on the cover, and a diary inscribed, "A Pioneer, Model in Study and Behavior." Pens, with replaceable cartridges, blue ink. Some have erasers, though they hardly erase anything. The pencil case, cardboard, 2-sectioned. The newer ones are plastic, with a lid that snaps shut with a crack. On the table, a mug with leftover tea from the day before. Next to it, a sandwich wrapped in newspaper or parchment. This is the school snack. Bread with sausage or butter and sugar. On good days, a boiled egg or an apple. But even plain bread was already something. Mom checks everything before the child leaves. Is the coat buttoned? Is the hat on? The scarf wrapped properly? In winter, there are also valenki, heavy and warm felt boots. On rainy days, galoshes that squeak when walking. And of course, the badge. The pioneer pin with Lenin's face, a neatly pressed red necktie, a symbol of belonging. It's tied carefully so it doesn't twist. The necktie is serious business. The first step, into the stairwell. The stairs are cold, the walls chipped but familiar. Every stairwell has its own silence. Faded posters on the walls, the smell of boiled beets, someone's coat left to dry on a radiator. And always, the soft creak of a door opening somewhere. Outside, frost. Breath turns to mist. School bags pressed tightly against small shoulders. Children walk in small groups. Some chew snow, some run ahead, others walk silently, half asleep. But everyone knows the way. Everyone walks the same path. And there it is, the school. Gray with white columns. At the entrance, a student on duty wearing a red armband. He checks if everyone's arrived on time. Inside, warm radiators, the scent of paint and chalk, and the rising murmur as students fill the classrooms. The school routine is complete. The day has begun, but the morning lingers in the body, in the creases of the coat, in the scent of jam, in the chill on the ears, and in the quiet that now trails behind. This was an ordinary school morning in the Soviet Union, one of many, but each one began an entire world of childhood. When the apartment door closes, it's still dark outside. Winter in the city is long, and dawn arrives reluctantly. Steps descend slowly. The stairs are stone, worn smooth. On the walls, faded patches from old paint, crumbling plaster, and Soviet slogans that long ago lost their grandeur. The building's entrance door shuts with a muffled thud. Outside, frost again. Breath turns instantly into vapor. Snow crunches underfoot. The air smells of dampness, smoke, and cold. Near every building, familiar faces. The same people in the same coats, every day at the same time. Some are heading to school, some to the factory, others to the accounting office or the district administration. But everyone shares the same route, toward the bus stop. In the morning silence, you can hear a Zhiguli car starting somewhere in a courtyard. Its engine groans. But mostly, people walk. It's a 10-minute walk to the stop. In winter, longer. People walk quietly. The road is icy, puddles frozen over with tire tracks. The roadside is buried in snow. No one has scattered sand or salt. You just walk slowly, staring at the ground to avoid slipping. At the stop, a line. The tram or bus arrives every 15 to 20 minutes, and it doesn't always stop. People stand close together, all in coats, all in hats, all wearing the same expression, one of patience and habit. Someone is holding a string bag. Someone is reading the newspaper Izvestia. Someone is drinking tea from a thermos. A few lucky ones have a seat on the bench, but the bench is metal, cold, covered with a scarf or a folded newspaper. The bus pulls up. The engine hums dully, and icy slush sprays from under the wheels. The windows are fogged up. Inside, it's cramped. People press against one another, bags underfoot, school bags overhead. The air smells of wool, wet mittens, gasoline, and perfume. The doors close slowly with effort. The bus moves off. Outside the window, familiar facades, concrete high-rises, old trees with peeling bark, the Producty store with its red sign that never lit up. Along the roadside, billboards with slogans, the 5-year plan, ahead of schedule, glory to labor, we fulfill the plan. The ride is long. At each stop, the same faces. People you recognize but never speak to. Sometimes someone coughs, someone sighs, someone snaps a briefcase shut. Occasionally, someone leans their forehead against the window and dozes. The trolley rocks gently, like a cradle. For some, it's a 40-minute commute to work. For others, just 3 stops. But in every ride, the same silence. As if the city hasn't fully woken up. As if everyone is still in yesterday. Sometimes someone gets off early. It's faster to walk. Along the sidewalk, dodging puddles, past the Soyuzdruk kiosk, where newspapers haven't been laid out yet. Past a man carrying a sack of bread for the grocery store. Past a woman sweeping snow with an old broom outside a school. And finally, when you reach your destination, an office, a school, or a factory, the world seems just a little brighter. Because there are familiar faces, familiar desks, a familiar kettle, familiar words. The journey is over, but its silence lingers in your mind. This path is not just about getting from one place to another. It's the setting of the tone for the day. A quiet preparation for another Soviet day. A workday in the Soviet Union didn't begin with to-do lists or meetings. It began with a coat on a hanger, melting snow on galoshes, and a slow walk through the corridor, where the light bulbs flickered and the walls were painted halfway in green. In a typical factory or office, it was chilly in the morning. The space warmed up slowly. The air smelled of dust, old furniture, and paper. Underfoot, linoleum, worn thin in places, creaking under heels. In the corner stood a coat rack, heavy coats hanging from it. Below, a line of felt boots, galoshes, and rubber shoes. Some brought indoor slippers. Some wore white coats over their clothes. Others, dark blue overalls with a zipper and a chest pocket. Desks stood in rows. Each one had a green desk mat, an inkwell, and folders labeled number. 1 inch or incoming documents. The office supplies were strict and functional. Some desks had typewriters. When the sharp clatter of keys echoed across the room, it meant the day had officially begun. At 9 sharp, the morning briefing. In the manager's office stood a long table, above which hung a portrait of Brezhnev or Lenin. On the walls, slogans: "Work is a matter of honor," "Safety above all," "Socialist competition," "Our motivation." Everyone had their role. Some compiled reports, some prepared invoices, some worked with blueprints spread out on a large table with weights at the corners. Responsibility was collective. Individuality, a conditional thing. In factory workshops, the atmosphere was different. There was no silence there. Machines thundered, engines roared, gears whistled. The air, hot with a metallic tang. Oil stains on the floor and dust and welding sparks in the air. Outside it was freezing, but inside, scorching heat. Workers wore protective clothing, padded jackets, mittens, boots. Some had safety goggles, others, dirty helmets. The work was rhythmic, the same movements over and over. But in that repetition lay a kind of certainty that the day was progressing, that everything was going as it should. In women's offices, accounting departments, or HR offices, there were rituals of their own. Windows were opened to let in fresh air. Desks were wiped clean. The kettle was plugged in. On the windowsill, houseplants, geraniums, ficuses, or cacti. Nearby, a newspaper or a knitting project. During breaks, brief conversations about children, cues, and new recipes. The equipment was old but reliable. Telephones were black with rotary dials. Their buzzing could send a shiver through your spine. Everyone had to remember internal numbers: 3-24, 1-15, 4-12. Phone calls were short and to the point, no unnecessary words. In the rooms, wall clocks that ticked loudly. Their ticking could be heard over the noise of typewriters, and everyone waited for the lunch break like a small celebration. But it was still nearly 3 hours away. People worked calmly, without rushing, but never idling. Work was part of daily life, not just a duty, but something established, familiar, almost ceremonial. A Soviet office or factory lacked glamour or comfort, but it had discipline. It had its own silence, its own routine. And every office, every desk, every typewriter was part of a greater, unchanging machine. The weekday. School welcomed students with a familiar smell, a mix of paint, damp old wood, and something else, indescribable but deeply familiar. Anyone who had ever stepped into a Soviet school would recognize that scent instantly. It permeated everything: textbooks, desks, teachers' smocks, wet scarves in the cloakroom. The hallways were long with high ceilings. The walls painted halfway in green or blue, the top half whitewashed. On the walls, bulletin boards, our class, duty schedule, pioneer's corner. And posters with Lenin quotes, portraits of labor heroes, photos from parades. Before class, a mandatory assembly. Children lined up in rows, bags in hand, sleepiness in their eyes. The principal or vice principal read the announcements. Who was late, who was sloppily dressed, who forgot their pioneer necktie. Everything was strict, but familiar. Classrooms had wooden desks, many of them carved with initials from older students. The desktops were scratched, stained with ink. The blackboard, often dusty gray from chalk. Above it, a portrait of Lenin or Gorky. Nearby, a map of the USSR with bold red borders. The teacher entered, and silence fell. Usually wearing a smock, light blue or white. In hand, a grade book. Their voice was calm, accustomed to discipline. The lesson began with the words, "Sit down. Open your notebooks." On every desk, notebooks with grid or slanted lines, wrapped in plain brown paper. Handwriting, neatly practiced. In the upper right corner, date, number, classwork. No glitter pens, only blue ink. Ink stains were a common sight. The first lesson, mathematics. The teacher holds a pointer. On the blackboard, equations. Students answer while standing. If you're unprepared, it's a minus in the gradebook. The classroom is silent. Only the scratching of pens and the smell of chalk. Someone secretly sketches a tank in their notebook. Someone stares out the window. During the break, noise. The bell rings sharply, like a fire alarm. Children burst into the hallway. There's chatter, jostling, trading of stamps, chewing gum and game chips. Some pull out bread with butter. Others rush to the snack counter. At the buffet, tea in faceted glasses, sweet buns, bread with butter, sometimes pastries. The selection is limited, but always the same. After eating, a gray paper napkin that tears more than it wipes. The second lesson, Russian language or literature. The teacher reads a story aloud. Her voice is soft but confident. What did the author mean? The key question asked every time. The answers. Like templates. But they're accepted. In the corner of the classroom, a bookcase. Cherewo, Merzilka, young technician. Some students hide notes in the covers. Others just flip through the pages, feeling the rough texture of the paper. During history class, large maps. The student on duty brings in the globe. The teacher points at it with a stick while telling stories about Suvorov's campaigns. Everyone has notebooks filled with maps, short outlines, and dates to memorize. The third lesson, shop class. The boys head to the workshop. Chopping planks, drilling, hammering. The air smells of sawdust, machine oil, and metal. The girls to sewing, thread, needles, napkins, chaika sewing machines. The fourth lesson, music or physical education. In the gym, it's cold. Children wear leotards, light shoes, or sneakers. They run, throw a ball. The teacher, in a tracksuit, blowing a whistle. Then comes the bell for the last break. The school starts to quiet down. In the classrooms, tired looks, slow movements. But everyone is waiting. Just a little longer, and they can go home. And again, backpack on the shoulders, hat on the head, scarf around the neck. The school doors, big, heavy, swing open, letting them out. The sun is low, the snow crunches, and the school stays behind, leaving in memory the chalk, the blackboard, the scent of the cafeteria, and the anticipation of the next morning's bell. After school, after work, after lunch, in every district, in every city, in every courtyard, there was one constant stop along the daily route. The queue. At the grocery store, the household goods store, the butcher's. It didn't matter. One thing mattered: to stand. And to wait. You could spot the line from afar. It had no sign, no announcement. But it stretched from the store entrance, along the windows, sometimes around the corner. People joined silently. They didn't ask what was being sold. They simply got in line. Because if something was being sold, it meant you had to take it. In winter, the line steamed. Everyone in hats, coats, breathing into their hands, shifting from foot to foot. Someone smoked, someone read the newspaper, someone had a thermos of tea. A small child stood in felt boots, holding their mother's hand. Her cheeks were red and her glasses fogged up. Ahead, silence. No arguments. Because everyone is in the same situation. It doesn't even matter who's last. Who are you behind? The only question you need to ask. They don't let everyone into the store at once. The door opens, 3 people leave, 2 more enter. And so it goes. The line lives. Slowly, but it lives. Inside, a smell. Not of the products, but of the space itself. A place where thousands breathe, wait, shift their weight from foot to foot. The floor tiles, light brown, worn down. Underneath, ice or slush brought in from the street. Overhead, flickering lamps. The ceiling, low. The shelves, simple, The saleswoman, in a white coat, a red apron, her hair tucked under a net, a name tag on her chest, though no one reads it. Her face, stern, tired, but her hands, confident. In the display case, sausage, or rather two kinds, doctors and amateur, both sold by weight, cut directly from large wrapped blocks. The saleswoman slices slowly with a big knife, weighs carefully. She places it on old-style scales with metal weights. Every gram counts. A little extra on top, she asks from behind her glasses, then adds another slice, wraps it in gray paper, no bag, just the paper, and hands it across the counter. In the dairy section, a different line. Here you find kefir in glass bottles. The caps, aluminum, opened with a spoon. Milk, also in glass. If you carry it carefully, it won't spill. Bottles are returned later. Each has a deposit value. At the register, chewing gum, Rocket or Cosmos, a rare treasure. Children stare at it, asking, "Does it come with stickers?" The saleswoman smiles, rarely, but warmly. Not today. Everything goes into a mesh shopping bag. Red, green, beige. It stretches like a web. Bread, bottles, sausage, all inside. If there's a lot, into a second bag or a paper-lined plastic one. Back again. Through the same courtyard, the same door. Fingers frozen. But there's sausage in the bag. That means the day wasn't wasted. And at home, someone's already waiting. Someone glances at the bundle. What did you get? And when you pull out the sausage, it's not just food. It's a victory. Quiet, modest, without applause, but very important. And once again, silence. The day moves on. But the cue still echoes in your head. It's patience. It's quiet. It's slow, calm stubbornness. A part of every Soviet life. In the Soviet Union, the word lunch carried special weight. It wasn't just a meal. It was a ritual. A short break in the workday. An island of warmth amid hours of labor. The roar of machines, the clatter of typewriters, and the creak of office doors. Canteens were everywhere. At factories, schools, research institutes, post offices, universities. Some large, with high ceilings and long dining halls. Others small, just a few tables. But they all shared one defining feature: the smell. The air was filled with a familiar blend. Boiled cabbage, tomato sauce, steeping tea, a trace of laundry powder, and something else undefinable yet consistent. It was the smell of the canteen, recognizable from far away. The floor was tiled, often in a checkerboard pattern of white and gray. The walls were either covered with light wallpaper or painted halfway up. Above the door, a sign, Cafeteria Number 3. Nearby, a sanitation rules poster. In the corner, a sink with a bar of soap in a tin can held up by wire. There was always a line. People silently held metal trays, moving slowly past the serving area, guided by clattering metal rails. The dishes, steel plates, bowls, and spoons. And the glasses, thick-walled with rough edges. Soup always came first, in deep metal bowls. Most often, borscht. Red with potatoes, cabbage, sometimes beans. Occasionally, pickled cucumber soup or pasta soup. The spoon, heavy, wide. You had to grip it tightly or it would slip out of your hand. For the main course, a cutlet, or meatballs, or fish, breaded, sometimes with a smell that made you choose something else. The side dish, buckwheat, pasta, rice, or mashed potatoes, often with gravy, and a slice of bread. The loaf, pre-sliced, but unevenly. The slice, thick, with a hard crust. Salads were simple, grated carrots with garlic, cabbage with vinegar, beets with oil, all served in small glass bowls, salt in an open jar. Someone reached in by hand, someone used their fingers. To drink, compote, dark red, almost brown, made from dried fruits. Sometimes, tea, black, astringent, served in a glass without a holder. Sugar, in cubes, placed separately on a small plate. If any were left, people took them with them, for later. Some ate slowly, some quickly. But everyone was silent. Only the clinking of spoons, the rattling of trays, the rustle of bags, and the occasional short exchange of words. Tables, square, covered with plastic tablecloths. Chairs, wooden, their backs scratched. At the center of each table, a jar of napkins, gray, rough, almost like cardboard. Nearby, a water carafe. No one really wanted to drink from it, but it was always there. Sometimes, above all this, a radio played quietly, monotonously from a speaker in the corner. -7 in Kharkiv, +1 in Chisinau. Then, a march or instrumental music. And again, silence. After lunch, dishes had to be returned. To the service window, into large plastic bins. Plates and bowls had to be placed gently. No loud clattering. Inside the bins, leftover compote, traces of mashed potatoes, glasses smudged with lips. And finally, the exit, into snow, into rain, into wind. But now, with a different feeling, as if the day had gained weight, as if the work meant something. Because there was lunch, there was a break, there was soup, bread, and compote, which meant everything was going as it should. After lunch, while factories still roared and schools carried on with final lessons, at home, it was time for quiet chores. The kind that didn't require rushing. The kind done with years of habit. The kind that filled half the day with everyday life. Laundry wasn't automatic. It wasn't about pressing buttons. It was a real process. With its own logic, its own rhythm, its own pace. In many apartments stood the Malyutka washing machine. Small, round, enamel-coated. It was brought into the kitchen or bathroom. Water was poured in manually, first hot from the kettle, a pot, or tap. Then came the detergent. Laundry detergent, Lotos iced or Belizna. White with a chemical scent, slightly abrasive to the touch. It was scooped with a spoon. It foamed immediately, and the foam had to be scooped by hand or drained through a hose. Laundry was sorted. Light, separately, colored, separately. Old bed sheets, aprons, shirts, children's socks, men's undershirts, rags. Everything, one, by hand. The Malyutka machine had no settings, only a soft vibration and the hum of the motor. Rinsing was done in a basin, in several changes of water. Cold water stung the hands, but it was changed patiently. The final rinse, with potassium permanganate or vinegar, to remove the detergent smell. Sometimes, with a drop of cologne for scent, wringing by hand. Roll up the sleeves, grab the edges, squeeze out every drop. Afterward, water on the floor, splashes on the apron, damp traces on the linoleum. But there was something calming about it. The hands moved. The mind went quiet. Drying took place on the balcony. In winter, directly in the frost. The laundry froze, became stiff like plywood. In spring, it fluttered in the wind. On the clotheslines, wooden clothespins, some painted. Everything, lined up evenly. White pillowcases, children's shirts, robes, towels. While the laundry dried, it was time for other tasks. Dusting, sweeping the kitchen, polishing the floor with wax, taking an old rag and wiping down a shelf, or scrubbing the sink with citric acid. Not because it was urgent, but because it felt right. Every room had its own silence. The radio was off. The children were at school. The husband still at work. Only the faucet dripped. And the scent of detergent slowly filled the air. In the room, soft light. A cactus on the windowsill. A stack of freshly ironed laundry on the chair. The iron, heavy with a heat dial, sometimes still a Soviet model. Ironing, slow and steady, Every seam, every crease, heat, fold, place in the wardrobe. Everything in order, and then mending. A special wooden mushroom-shaped darning tool was used. A sock was pulled over it, a needle threaded, a hole sewn shut. If done carefully, it looked neat. If rushed, it still held. The work lasted an hour, 2, sometimes half a day. But no one complained. Because in every motion there was structure, calm, a clear purpose, a sense that life was in order, that the day had not been wasted. Then, silence. Hot tea, dry hands, and clean towels hanging on the radiator. And in that quiet routine, something deeply human. Because when things are clean, when the house is in order, when the rag has been replaced, it feels as if the world becomes a little clearer and a little warmer. After the laundry, after the cleaning, after a brief tea break, came the time when the apartment slowly shifted into evening. And with that change came sounds, not from the street, not from the neighbors, but from the corner of the room where the radio stood, or the television. In every Soviet home, the radio held a place of honor. It could be built into the wall, the kind with a white plastic grill left on for years, or a standalone set, Okean Spadola VEF, with shiny knobs, a dial marked with the names of cities, and a little red light that moved slowly as you searched for the signal. The radio was usually turned on as soon as the children returned from school, during dinner, or simply, just because. It spoke, it recited poems, it played music, and it did all of this slowly, unhurriedly, on weekdays, Radio Mayak or first channel of all Union radio. The announcers' voices were calm, measured, emotionless. Each sentence sounded like a message from a distant station. In Moscow, it is 6:30 p.m. You are listening to the evening information program. After the news, music, instrumental, often accordion, piano, sometimes orchestra. The melodies were familiar, recognizable, but never intrusive. No one sang along. People just listened. Or didn't listen, but still heard. The music became part of the background. The radio stood in the kitchen, in the living room, in the bedrooms. And even if it wasn't turned on, it could always be turned on. It was always there. Television came later, and not in every household. But if it was there, it became a centerpiece of daily life. Unost, record, electron, temp, large boxes with curved screens, black and white images, 3 channels at most, often only 2. Before switching it on, the TV was wiped down, sometimes with a napkin, sometimes a sleeve. Turning it on made a soft click, and there was a short delay. The screen slowly unfolded, beginning with a bright spot in the center. The evening program started at 7 p.m. First, the opening graphics, then the news. Vremya. A newsreader in a suit, holding a folder, speaking clearly. Behind him, a map or the flag. Every household had its tradition of watching Vremya, and afterward, their own post-broadcast discussion. More on the harvest. Again about the plan. After the news, a film. Often Soviet classics. Office romance. Moscow does not believe in tears. D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers. When a beloved film aired, people sat closer. Lights were turned off, and the TV became a window into something bigger. Not capitalism, not America, just a different rhythm, into dialogues, into familiar faces. For children, good night, little ones, Bear, Bunny, Felia, Stepashka. The animation was simple, but warm. The bedtime song, a lullaby everyone knew. And then, time to sleep, little one, followed by silence. Sometimes the TV would freeze, snow on the screen, static hissing, and everyone knew the tower's acting up. The antenna slipped. The connector needs adjusting. So someone would go out to the balcony, turn the antenna, wave a hand. There? Better? Almost. There, hold it. Before sleep, a few more minutes of the night program. Or music. Or silence. The screen would shrink into a tiny white dot, then fade completely. And again, silence. The radio off, the TV cooling down. In the room, the echo of a voice that had just said something important. And for a while longer, the melody of the program's theme plays in your head. And that brings peace. Because the world had spoken, and it had gone quiet, gently. Department store. A word that sounds heavy, massive, and it matches exactly what it represents. It wasn't just a store. It was a place of events, a place of searching, cues, surprise, and anticipation. A place where, even though there was often nothing, people still went, always. The building, large, rectangular, concrete, unadorned. On the facade, faded letters spelling Univermag, department store, sometimes with neon lighting that hasn't worked in years. In the windows, mannequins, a woman in a coat, a man in a suit, a child in a pilot cap. All frozen, all a little sad. At the entrance, heavy doors. They creak. The handle, metal, cold. Inside, dim lighting and warm air filled with the scent of dust, fabric, and worn linoleum. Inside the department store, several floors, each with its own theme. The first, shoes and handbags. The second, fabric, clothing, sewing supplies. The third, carpets, dishes, electrical appliances. In every corner, a salesperson who already knows what's missing and is never surprised by what you're looking for. Shopping at the Univermag is never rushed. First, you browse. People walk slowly, studying everything. They touch the wool hats, the knit sweaters, the faux leather purses. They ask, "Do you have a size smaller?" The usual answer. What you see is what we have. On the display, boots. The sizes rarely fit, but if you find your pair, it's an event. You try them on carefully. Stand up, squat, check the side view. Some ask for opinions, others grab them immediately, because a second chance may not come. In the fabric section, a different atmosphere entirely. Here, measurements are in meters. The rustle of measuring tapes, women's voices comparing. Does this cotton fade? Is this synthetic? Fabric is chosen for everything. Dresses, curtains, pillowcases. Sometimes, just because it's beautiful. The saleswoman stands behind the counter. She has large scissors. She cuts cleanly, evenly, and wraps the fabric in brown paper. She writes on the package with a ballpoint pen. 2 meters, cotton, 3.20 rubles. It's not just a piece of cloth. It's a future thing. On the shelves, boxes of buttons. In jars, spools of thread. In boxes, lace. Someone sifts through everything with their fingers. It all matters. It all might be useful one day. On the top floor, dishes, glasses in neat rows, plates with gold trim, aluminum spoons, enamel pots with strawberries painted on the side. Above each item, a sign. Please do not touch. But everyone touches them anyway. Nearby, radios, warming quietly on the shelves. They're expensive, but they look reliable. Okeen, VEF, Jupiter. Sometimes televisions, behind glass, like in a museum. In the department store, people don't shop for pleasure. They shop out of need, or luck. If you find something, take it, because tomorrow it may be gone. At the checkout, a queue. The cashier rings up the sale. Her hand stamps the receipt without looking. Then, a paper bag, or newspaper, or nothing. Just hand it over bare. And finally, the exit. The creak of the door again, the cold air again, and in your hands, a purchase. Maybe nothing extraordinary, but still, a thing. Bought, yours, and in that lies a kind of satisfaction. Quiet, Soviet, calm. Because what mattered wasn't what exactly you bought. What mattered was, you found it, and took it. When all the day's tasks are done, the laundry, the shopping, the cleaning, comes the moment when you just want to go outside. No reason, no direction, just to go. In Soviet culture, this was almost a ritual of its own, going out among people. Not to the market, not to a queue, but simply to the park or the town square, to see others, to move slowly, to be present. Outside, silence. An afternoon calm. The sun hung low, but still shone gently. Shadows grew long. The trees, either light green or strewn with fallen leaves, depending on the season. The air, clean, dry, with a trace of dust rising from the footpaths paved in worn-out tiles. In the city center, a park. Ordinary. Not one with fountains or attractions, but with benches, flower beds, and chipped street lamps. But this was the place where people came to rest their eyes after watching television, or their legs, after hours in the kitchen. On the benches, familiar silhouettes. Elderly women in kerchiefs, retired men in caps, teenagers cracking sunflower seeds. Nearby, mothers with strollers, everyone quiet, or speaking softly, slowly, with no rush. People strolled the paths calmly, in pairs, alone, with hands hanging loose, without any destination, just watching their steps, listening to the crunch of sand, or to the flutter of a sparrow somewhere in the branches above. Beside the park, the square, the central one, with a statue of Lenin. His figure loomed high on a pedestal, his coat frozen mid-motion, his hand outstretched. Children ran around it. They didn't look up, but everyone knew. He was the central figure. On the other side of the square, an ice cream kiosk. Small blue with a sign reading ice cream. Just 3 people in line. The saleswoman wore a smock. In her hand, a long spoon scooping balls into wafer cones. There was no variety, only one kind, plombier, but it was delicious, always. Children held their cones carefully, licked slowly so it wouldn't drip, sat on the curb, men with newspapers, women with shopping bags. In the air, peaceful silence. From the loudspeaker mounted on a pole, soft instrumental music played. Everything felt slower to its rhythm, even the wind, even footsteps. Somewhere in the bushes, a bird called out. In the flower bed, an old man watered the flowers from a metal watering can. He'd worked there for years. Everyone knew him. He rarely spoke, but when he nodded, it was as good as a greeting. On the square, another kiosk, selling postcards, calendars, pins, everything. Just a few kopecks, but no one was buying. People just looked, asked, "Is this a new delivery?" Brought in yesterday. And then, silence again. Sometimes someone took a photo, an old Zenit or a boxy Smina. They posed in front of the flower bed, or by the statue. No smiles, but serious expressions. Photos from such outings were kept in family albums for decades. And now, the sun dipped even lower. The street lamps weren't on yet, but they were getting ready. People slowly drifted away. Someone remembered it was time to cook dinner. Someone else, that they needed to stop by the grocery store. But everyone walked slowly. No one rushed, because this outing wasn't about errands. It was about a pause, about observation, about silence that didn't need to be filled. And even the ice cream wasn't about sweetness. It was about a moment, about calm. Paper, a chair, lists, a queue, a corridor. It all began with the phrase, "It needs to be filed," or "submitted," or "stamped." The word bureaucracy wasn't scary. It was part of the landscape. Like autumn rain, predictable, a little exhausting, but constant. In every city, in every neighborhood, there was a ZHEK, the Housing Maintenance Office. A little further, the post office. A bit farther, the passport desk. And somewhere, another office where you had to show up from 9 to 12, excluding weekends. The buildings all looked the same. Doors painted dark green, walls smudged with fingerprints and old announcements. In the hallway, benches, some without backs, others with creaky legs. People sat on them, silently, waiting. There were no official queue numbers, though sometimes a notebook was kept. Someone would place it on a windowsill. Someone else flipped through the pages. But most simply remembered, "I'm after the woman in the red headscarf, and the old man in felt boots is behind me. In the air, the scent of paper. Old, dry paper, ink, worn clothing, tea from a thermos." There was little to listen to. Occasionally, a cough, a squeaky door opening, or the soft chime of a wall clock ticking away. On the door, a nameplate, chief engineer or office number none gone below, a list of names taped on with yellowed Scotch tape, often reattached several times. The handwriting, neat and formal. A ballpoint pen, the ink faded. But you could still read. Tuesday, before noon, bring an application. When the door opened, everyone stood up. Those standing moved closer. Someone asked, "Are you after someone?" "I think I'm after you." Inside the office, another world. A desk with a plexiglass top, a chair on wheels. On the desk, a rotary phone, notebooks, folders, pens, paper clips, a typewriter, humming or already quiet. And the most important item, the stamp. A real one with a wooden handle. It was pressed down firmly, with that unmistakable sound. The conversation, brief, formal. "Your passport. Sign here. Please wait. Come back next week." Questions, rare. Explanations, minimal. People stayed quiet. They knew there was no point in arguing, and no one wanted to fight anyway. After the signature, another paper, another line, another office, or the walk home. With the feeling that not much had been accomplished, but still, something had been done. At the exit, a bulletin board, covered in pushpins, yellowed tape, and peeling corners. No littering. Payment due by the 5th. Dear residents, and between them, small notices. Looking to buy a ficus. Lost cat. Selling a sideboard. And outside, the same city, the same streets. But now, you held a new paper, with a fresh stamp, and a quiet sense of victory. No fireworks, but a calm certainty that everything was in order. In every stairwell, there was at least one man like that. In every apartment, their own, a father, a grandfather, or the neighbor from the 5th floor. But they all had one thing in common. They could fix anything. Not because they had manuals, but because there was no other way. In every Soviet apartment, there was always a corner for tools. It might be a special drawer, or an old cabinet, or even a suitcase with faded USSR stickers. Inside, everything had its own system. Not by shelves, but by memory. There you'd find wrenches, sharp knives, screwdrivers with taped handles, old nails in a shoebox, a drill bit, pliers, and a measuring tape. Metal with a bent ribbon that no longer retracted fully. The wall above the table was covered with hooks. Hanging on them, hammers, brushes, wires, rolls of tape, even nails hammered in just in case. Everything useful. Everything had once come in handy. Everything would again. Household repairs were slow, but purposeful. Something squeaks, it needs oil. The faucet drips? It needs tightening. A shelf wobbles? It needs fixing. And not tomorrow, today. Around the apartment you could hear tap, tap, tap. Then bzzz. Then click. It wasn't renovation. It was life in motion. Silence was for Sundays. But today was Saturday. Technical day, as the joke went. The handyman didn't complain. He didn't rush. He sat on the floor, flashlight between his teeth, unscrewing something in the kitchen corner. Next to him, a bucket, a rag, and a jar labeled spindle oil. It smelled like the garage in childhood. The shelf, he built himself. The clock, disassembled and reassembled. The lamp, soldered. The cord, replaced. The cabinet door, adjusted. Even the radio only worked because there was a short. I fixed it. To him, things weren't just objects. They were mechanisms. They were meant to serve. If something broke, it wasn't thrown away. It was repaired, even if it had been fixed 3 times already. His wife had her own role. She passed him nails, held the light, stood by when needed, because it wasn't just about doing. It was about someone being there to see it done. Sometimes he'd sit and wipe oil from his hands, staring at something for a long time. Not because he didn't know how to fix it, but because he was thinking how to fix it right. Because if you're going to do it well, and do it to last. In the evening, everything was put away. Tools placed back where they belonged. Screwed tight, wiped clean, checked. The cabinet closed. And once again, the home was in order. In Soviet daily life, there were no service calls, no call a handyman. The handyman was already there, one of your own, homegrown, real. And he didn't just know how to fix the faucet, he knew how to keep a home running, in quiet, in order, with care. As the day drew to a close, a different rhythm settled into the apartment. The fire of daytime tasks faded. Every corner of the home, every room, every object began to breathe more calmly. After dinner, quiet, not absolute, but familiar. You could hear the radiator crackling softly, the kettle cooling slowly, the old clock on the wall ticking steadily as if whispering, "It's all right. You're home." The light in the room, soft, not bright. A single bulb under a lampshade cast a warm, yellowish glow. Shadows, gentle. The furniture, as if frozen in thought. The tablecloth laid out evenly. Teapots washed, dishes stacked. Everything in its place. Someone picks up their knitting. A ball of yarn, needles, a soft creaking sound. Row after row. The movements are slow, refined. Another person sits at the table and opens a newspaper. Pravda, Izvestia, Literaturna Ukraina. They read silently. Only now and then. A short comment, not directed at anyone, just into the air. Children sit on the floor, sorting buttons, drawing with markers, building figures out of matchsticks. The radio plays something gentle. Accordion, violin, the voice of a narrator reciting poetry. From time to time. Tea, brewed in a small teapot. Loose leaves placed into a strainer. Left to steep. In glasses with metal holders. A little sugar, a slice of lemon, maybe a spoonful of jam. Simple, but personal. Sometimes, a conversation about the day, about plans, about needing to stop by the pharmacy tomorrow, that someone saw a friend at the bus stop, that the potatoes still need frying. The television is off. It just sits there, a dark rectangle. They listen to each other, to the house, in a way, to memories, because every object has a story. The blanket on the couch, a gift. The stool from the first apartment, the potted plant on the windowsill, growing for 10 years now. Even the spoon with a bent edge, not a random flaw, but a detail of daily life. The rooms are tidy, but not like a museum. Cozy, books on the shelves, pages yellowed with age. Next to them, postcards, sent from Crimea, Sochi, the Caucasus. Refrigerator magnets weren't a thing yet. Somewhere, a curtain sways, wind from an open window. Somewhere, a door creaks behind a wall. The neighbor has returned. The same squeaky step, the familiar turn of a key. Everything known. Before bed, someone sighs, sits in an armchair, silent. But it's not an empty silence. It's gratitude for the day, for the peace, for everyone being home, and everything in its place. Cleanliness wasn't just a necessity. In Soviet life, it was a form of respect. For oneself, for the home, for others. And when cleaning time came, no one asked, do we need to? They asked, where do we begin? Most often, Saturday, after breakfast. Once the tea was finished, the dishes washed, and the day just beginning. In the hallway, the smell of a fresh rag. In the kitchen, an overturned bucket. And on the table, an open jar labeled Cleaning Paste GOST 792-67. Every home had its own routine. Some started with the vacuum, others with windows, others with the bathroom. But everyone did it slowly, carefully, not just to check a box. Windows were wiped with a cloth made from an old bedsheet. First, damp, then dry, then a newspaper to make them shine. Fingers froze, but the sparkle of the glass was the reward. The windowsills were scrubbed thoroughly, flower pots removed, wiped, and returned. Every cactus, every geranium handled gently, as if they were alive, as if they were watching. Dust was wiped with a damp cloth, from tables, from shelves, from picture frames, from the television, especially from the carpet on the wall if there was one. You couldn't vacuum it, only wipe it carefully. In the kitchen, a ritual of its own. The gas stove disassembled piece by piece. Grates soaked in hot water, baking soda and vinegar on the stove. Then, a dry cloth. Shine, polish, silence. The tiles were washed with Comet if you had it. If not, with laundry soap. You shaved it with a knife, threw the shavings into warm water, whipped it into foam. Then, a sponge. Then, again. The floor was washed with a bucket and a rag. No mop. Kneeling. A hand scoops the water. The rag is twisted. The motion. Away from you. Then, toward you. Then, once more. Throughout the apartment, the smell of damp floors lingers. On the balcony, everything in its place. Boxes neatly stacked, jars rearranged, a broom, a brush, a rag, all familiar, all part of the home. But in the stairwell, a different story. That was for the Subotnik. That was communal. There, neighbors gathered with rags, rakes, and cans of paint. Notices were posted. Saturday at 9 o'clock, courtyard cleanup. Attendance mandatory. Adults brought out buckets, water, shovels. They painted benches, swept sidewalks. Children carried twigs, played in the dust. Some drew on the pavement with chalk. Others just watched their fathers paint the gas pipes. It wasn't an order. It was a tradition. Quiet, steady, undebated. Everyone knew Saturday was the time to tidy up together. And afterward, a feeling of completion. Tiles shining, glass sparkling, a freshly painted bench, and in the chest, a lightness, as if the home itself could breathe better. Cleanliness wasn't a goal, it was a state, a way of saying, here, people live here, there is order. And when the rag hangs from the edge of the bucket and your hands smell of soap, there's peace, deep, true, domestic. The apartment grows quieter, the voice of the radio, softer, the lights, dimmer. People slow down, everything prepares for night. Not on command, not by schedule, but simply because it's time. Bedtime in a Soviet home wasn't sudden. It was a process, slow, like a quiet prayer, like closing a book. In the bathroom, a mirror, slightly fogged, a chipped enamel sink. On its edge, toothbrushes, each in a separate glass, no colored grips or fancy bristles. They were distinguished by how worn they were. Tooth powder, in a round tin. It opens with a soft click. A pinch is sprinkled onto a finger or brush. It grits against the teeth, tastes like chalk and cleanliness. The face, rinsed with cold water. Hands, wiped with a damp cloth. The towel, coarse but warm. One last glance into the mirror. Not to evaluate. Out of habit. To see yourself. Before bed. In the room, the bed is turned down. The blanket pulled out. The sheet checked. The pillow fluffed. It isn't feather-filled or orthopedic. Just a pillow. Slightly lumpy, a little firm, but familiar. In a cotton pillowcase from last spring. The pajamas, made of chintz, thin fabric, faded floral pattern, pants with a drawstring. Buttoned shirt. They'd been folded in the closet, on a shelf beside the towels. They go to bed slowly. First, the children. They're still read to, or allowed to flip through veseli kartinki, funny pictures. Beside them, a soft toy, or a pillow shaped like a cat. Then, the adults. One, still reading. The other, sitting in the dark, quietly. On the nightstand, an alarm clock. Round, mechanical. You set it, wind it up, press the button, and then you hear it. Tick, tick, tick. Familiar, rhythmic, calm. On the radiator, a rag, drying. On the chair, neatly folded clothes. On the floor, slippers placed just so. In the window, the night sky blurred by the curtain. The room is almost dark. Only the red glow of the clock, or the soft yellow of a nightlight, or nothing at all. The silence, like a blanket, deep, real. The last sounds, a cough from the next room, the distant rumble of a tram, a creaking bed, and tick, tick, tick. Sleep doesn't come suddenly. It arrives slowly, like evening tea, like the shadow of a lamp, like the breath of someone who has finally settled down and is no longer in a hurry. When windows fade out, when the last flickers of the television disappear, when the tea has cooled, pillows are fluffed just right, and the blanket lies evenly, that's when night arrives. The true night. The one that asks no permission. The one that embraces without words. In the city, the night is not fully dark. Entryway windows glow. Somewhere in the distance, a lonely street lamp. Its light breaks against tree branches, filters through the dust on the glass. This light doesn't warm, doesn't tire. It just is. Simply is. In the yard, the benches are deserted, empty, as if forgotten. Yet each one holds memories of conversations, glances, silences. The sand in the sandbox smoothed over by the wind. A swing sways gently, not from the wind, just out of habit. In the apartment block, you can hear the faucet dripping on the 8th floor, a window creaking on the 4th, someone shutting a basement door. But none of this is noise. It's part of the silence. A silence with its own sound, its own rhythm, its own pulse. Sometimes you hear a Moskvich engine start. Someone works nights. The motor hums softly, then falls quiet. Silence fills the space again. When you walk through the night streets, it feels like the city is breathing. Slowly, deeply. The streets are empty, but not dead. They're resting. They too have dreams. Window lights are rare. 1, maybe 2. Sometimes 3. Someone might be reading, or working, or simply doesn't want to turn the lamp off. The light hovers in the air, motionless. The night doesn't swallow it. It tolerates it. In the village, night is different. There, the darkness is real, complete, deep. so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face, but you can hear everything. The window shutter clicking, a mouse rustling in the rafters, a log cracking in the stove. In the yard, the moon. It's light like water. Spilled over the rooftops, the walls of the house, the snow, the woodshed. The air is sharp with frost. It crackles as if alive. Even the dog doesn't bark. Even the rooster stays quiet. The sky, black, dense, strewn with stars. They seem anchored, bright, still. In the city, you don't see them. But here, it feels like you could reach out and touch them. And that brings peace. Like in childhood, in the house. It's warm. The stove still breathes. Beneath the blanket, coziness. In the entryway, the scent of wood. In the kitchen, a trace of dampness. And inside, the same silence as outside. No boundary between them. Because in the village, the walls are thinner, and the soul more open. Even the cats sleep differently. Not curled up, but stretched out. Without tension, without alertness. Because at night, everything feels safe. Everything is familiar. And now, the night reaches its fullness. The world seems to have paused, but not stopped. It has simply stopped rushing. The Soviet night is not dark. It's quiet. It holds everything. The factory that fell silent, the radio that no longer speaks, the apartment where everyone sleeps. It wraps the coat in the hallway, the kettle on the stove, the well-known sounds, and keeps them safe until morning. The silence of the night is not emptiness. It's a reservoir of calm, a place where the day rests before becoming tomorrow. When all has quieted, when doors are shut, when night has entered every corner, there is only one thing left: to think. Or rather, not to think, but to remember and to dream. Lying in bed, covered by a heavy quilt, listening to the soft snore of your father in the next room, or the creak of the floor under the cat's paws, thoughts come differently. Not about plans, but about what could be. Someone dreams of a trip to Crimea, imagines train tickets in a third-class carriage, warm evenings, salty water, white sand, a canvas tent, and the red sign that reads Holiday Reserve Day. Someone else dreams of a new dress, made of that very fabric seen on the second floor of the department store. Imagines walking down the street, carrying a net bag of bread, while everyone turns to look, and her mother saying, "It fits beautifully." Someone dreams of a Rubin television, big, color, in a wooden frame. One that shows all 3 channels. One where you can finally see the sea, the real blue one, not black and white. Children, of new skates, or a sled, or a set of markers called Young Artist, the kind without lines, and with silver and gold, and others dream of peace, of mornings without alarm clocks, of stores without lines, of sausages sold without rationing, of mail without smudged stamps. These dreams are not loud. They don't demand a different world. They are warm, homely, like tea with jam, like the scent of a freshly washed towel, like the glow of a nightlight. Sometimes these thoughts become dreams. In dreams, the trains arrive on time. Tickets are always available. The lines are short, and the ice cream never melts. In these dreams, the future isn't perfect, but it is warm. A future where the night isn't frightening, where everything is in its place, and every person is home. And in that moment, the eyes finally close. Eyelids grow heavy, breathing slows, hands go still, and thoughts fade away. Only one thing remains: a slow, deep, gentle sleep. A sleep that comes not because the body is tired, but because everything that needed to happen already has. And everything is well. Thank you for walking this path. The Soviet day is over. It's time to sleep.